The sun beat down on the cracked earth. The trees stood silent, their leaves withered, and the rivers had shrunk to muddy streaks. A tribe of early humans, hungry and desperate, crouched low in the tall grass. They had always gathered, never hunted. But today was different. Today, they carried sharpened wooden spears, their eyes locked on a lone antelope just steps away. Every breath was held, every heartbeat loud. One throw could mean survival. One mistake could mean death. In that fragile moment, they faced a choice that would echo through time. Would they become hunters, or vanish into the dust? Long before cities, before language, before fire was tamed and stories were told, there was survival. For a small tribe of early humans, every day was a test of endurance. They lived in the shadow of towering trees, beside muddy rivers and thorny grasslands, where every sound could be a predator or a meal. They were foragers, wanderers who traveled with the wind, collecting roots, berries, and insects. The oldest among them, bent by years and sun, remembered where the safest paths led. The younger ones followed closely, learning by watching, copying what worked, and avoiding what didn't. Danger was always nearby. Lions stalked the savannah. Snakes curled beneath cool rocks. Even the weather turned on them without warning. Life was not fair. It was simple: stay alert or become prey. In this world, one young woman stood out. Her name was Lyra. She was not the strongest or the fastest, but she was curious. While others focused only on what they could take from the land, Lyra watched the land itself. She noticed how birds scattered before a predator appeared. She saw how antelopes followed the wind and rested in the same shadows each evening. She didn't speak much, no one really did, but her eyes spoke of questions most had forgotten to ask. When the drought began, everything changed. The berries dried up. The roots grew harder to find. The river that once carried fish had sunk into the soil. Children cried for food. Elders sat quietly, knowing what this could mean. Hunger came like a slow poison, one that drained strength day by day. The tribe tried to move further south, but the land gave nothing. Even the insects had vanished. Lyra knew that foraging would not be enough. She watched the animals who still thrived, the hyenas, the leopards, even the eagles. They all hunted. They all took what they needed with tooth and claw. Humans, though clever, had never dared to try. The idea of chasing something so fast, so wild, it felt impossible. But desperation changes rules. One evening, while the tribe huddled under a dying tree, Lyra picked up a long, fallen branch. She rubbed its end against stone until it formed a crude point. She didn't know what to call it. She just knew it might be useful. Some laughed. Others ignored her. But a few watched, quietly curious, the way she had once been. She began practicing, first on rotten logs, then on tree trunks, then throwing her spear at fruit dangling from branches. Every throw was awkward, clumsy, but each one got closer. The air grew drier with each sunrise. The earth cracked underfoot, and the wind carried the scent of dust instead of water. The land had turned silent. Birds no longer sang in the mornings, and even the insects seemed to vanish. Hunger had become a shadow that followed every member of the tribe. The foraging trips brought back less with each passing day. Once full baskets returned nearly empty. Children cried at night, their stomachs hollow. Elders grew quiet, their eyes sunken and wise enough to know what came next. One by one, the tribe began to weaken, not from injury or attack, but from the slow, quiet ache of starvation. Then, one afternoon, it happened. A young boy, no older than 8, collapsed in the middle of a search for roots. His mother rushed to his side, lifting his limp body from the sun-baked ground. The others gathered around, silent. They had no medicine, no extra food, only fear. The boy opened his eyes but could not speak. His skin was hot, and his lips were cracked. His breathing was shallow. Lyra stood at the edge of the group, her jaw clenched, her eyes darting toward the distant plains. She had seen them that morning, antelopes grazing near the tree line. Dozens of them, strong, fast, alert, too fast to catch, too far to trap. But they were food. As the boy lay in his mother's arms, something shifted. Inside her, Lyra's hand reached for her spear, the one she had carved, shaped, and practiced with. Her grip tightened. "We can't keep waiting," she said, her voice barely more than a whisper. The others turned toward her. Some frowned. Others looked away. But a few, those who had watched her throw, who had seen the antelopes too, nodded. "We need to hunt," she continued. "Not tomorrow. Now." The idea struck like thunder. It was more than a suggestion. It was a challenge to everything the tribe had ever known. Foraging was survival. Hunting was death. That's what they believed. The animals were too fast, too wild. Spears were toys, not tools. But Lyra saw something different. She saw opportunity. She saw the boy, half-conscious in the dirt. She saw the withered hands of her grandmother. She saw her own ribs, visible beneath her skin. Fear had kept them from acting. Hunger would force them to try. She looked at the sky. Clouds gathered, but there was no promise of rain. She stepped forward and held up her spear. "I will go." The silence held for several heartbeats. Then a hand joined hers, one of the young men she had taught to throw. Then another. 3. Then 5. They would not go as a tribe. Not yet. But they would go as a spark. Lyra turned to the plains, to the grass taller than her shoulders, to the fading sun casting long shadows across the earth. The hunt had begun, not just for food, but for something far greater. It was the day early humans took their first true step toward dominance, not with fire, but with courage, and a sharpened stick. After the first hunt, something shifted in the tribe. The fear that once kept them grounded was now replaced by a flicker of possibility. But one success was not enough. If they were to survive, hunting had to become a skill, not just a miracle. Lyra gathered the same small group at the edge of the forest. They practiced every morning, before the sun reached its highest point. They shaped spears from stronger wood, using sharp stones to smooth the tips. Some tried throwing with both hands. Others tested different angles. Each failure was followed by laughter, not shame. They learned by watching the animals again, how predators stalked from the wind's direction, how they attacked from the shadows. Lyra noticed how vultures circled when a herd sensed danger, warning signs from the sky. She taught the others these small patterns. Hunting was no longer a wild chance. It was becoming a method. Still, not every day brought food. They missed targets. Spears broke. Legs tired. Once, they even scared an entire herd away by stepping too loudly. Frustration built like heat under the skin. But they did not give up. Each night, they shared stories by the fire. Each throw, each chase, each moment of near success became a lesson. The younger ones began copying the stances with sticks. Mothers tied stones to their children's arms for strength. Lyra watched the tribe shift slowly, less timid, more focused. They began walking taller. Eyes searched the horizon with purpose. Even the old ones began asking questions, curious rather than doubtful. The sun had barely begun to rise when Lyra and 5 others stepped into the tall grass. The world was quiet, save for the distant calls of birds and the soft crunch of dry earth beneath their feet. Each carried a crude wooden spear, hardened at the tip by fire. Their faces were drawn but focused. This was no practice. This was survival. They moved slowly, crouched low, mimicking the movements of the predators they had studied from afar. The antelopes grazed in the open plain ahead, unaware of the hunters inching closer. Lyra raised her hand, signaling the group to freeze. The largest antelope stood alone near the edge, chewing lazily. This was their moment. Lyra whispered, "Now." The spears flew, not perfect, not clean. One struck the antelope's side, another grazed its leg. The startled animal bolted, bleeding, crashing through brush. Without hesitation, the group gave chase. Feet pounded against dry earth. Breath came in gasps. Fear and hope collided in their chest. After a long run, they cornered the antelope near a muddy creek. Exhausted and wounded, it turned in circles, trying to escape. Lyra stepped forward, heart pounding, and drove her spear into its chest. It fell. They stood over the body, panting, stunned. For the first time, they had hunted. For the first time, they had won. No one spoke. No one needed to. Tears mixed with sweat. They were not just survivors. Now, they were hunters. Something ancient had awakened, and when they carried the meat back to the tribe, it was not just food they brought. It was proof. Proof that they could change. Proof that they could fight. And win. The tribe gathered as the hunters returned. Children ran forward, eyes wide at the sight of the slain antelope carried between them. Elders stood in disbelief. No one had expected them to return, let alone with food. Lyra dropped her spear to the ground, her arms shaking, not from fear but from the weight of what they had done. The meat was divided fairly. Every mouth tasted it. Every stomach began to feel full for the first time in many days. But it was not just the meat that changed them. It was the story. The young hunters described the moment, the chase, the impact, the final strike. They mimed the throw of the spear, the cries of the animal, the sound of victory. The tribe listened in silence, as if hearing the language of fire for the first time. Even the old ones, who had once scoffed, nodded slowly. Later that night, around a crackling fire, the tribe sat closer than usual. The heat touched their skin, but the warmth they felt came from within. For the first time, they were not only surviving, they were shaping their survival. Lyra looked up at the stars. She thought of the boy who had collapsed days ago, now smiling and chewing meat beside his mother. She thought of the fear that once ruled them, and how it had lost. They would hunt again, and again. The tools would improve, the throws would sharpen, but something had already changed deep within them. Days passed, then weeks. The hunters grew sharper, their throws more accurate, their eyes quicker. What began as a desperate gamble slowly became a rhythm of life. The tribe no longer waited for roots to grow or fruit to ripen. They stepped out into the land with confidence, knowing they could return with meat. Lyra, once the quiet observer, now stood as the unspoken leader. She didn't command, she showed, she taught, and in return, the tribe followed. Children played with small wooden spears, mimicking the chase. Elders sharpened tools and shaped better tips. The tribe, once fading from hunger, now pulsed with energy and life. The young boy who had collapsed during the drought ran again, laughing as he carried small branches back to camp. The people who had once doubted now gave quiet thanks with every meal. Hunting had become more than survival. It was unity, purpose. One morning, the tribe prepared for a larger hunt. The group had grown, no longer just the original 6. As they moved into the plains, Lyra paused and looked back at the camp. Fires burned. Children waved. The air no longer smelled of fear. When the hunt ended in success again, they returned, not just as providers, but as a people transformed. They had taken their place in the story of the earth, not just surviving it, but shaping it. And as the sun set, casting long shadows over the tall grass, Lyra sat beside the fire and watched the stars appear. Generations later, the story of Lyra's first hunt was still told by firelight. Children listened wide-eyed as elders spoke of a time when humans feared the plains. Her name became legend, not because she was the strongest, but because she dared to try. Her spear, worn smooth by years, was kept near the center of the camp, a symbol of change. And though seasons passed, and tools improved, one truth remained. It was courage that lit the path forward. From that single moment, when a girl stood with a wooden spear, humanity stepped into its future, no longer just survivors, but makers of destiny.